The autumn rain hammered against the windows of the Blackstone Pack's compound as Adrian Blackstone stood in his study, watching the storm with the kind of patience only a 200-year-old alpha could muster. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, restless and hungry for something he couldn't name. For centuries, he'd felt the weight of his destiny, an alpha without a mate, destined to lead his pack alone. But wolves weren't meant to be alone. The universe had other plans. Adrian was massive, built like a predator in human form. His shoulders were broad enough to fill doorways, his jaw sharp and angular, his eyes the color of molten silver that seemed to glow when his wolf pushed close to the surface. Dark hair fell across his forehead as he turned from the window, and the scar running along his left cheekbone, a reminder of a war fought decades ago, only added to his dangerous allure. At 32 in human years, he was in his absolute prime, and yet he felt the ache of incompleteness. His second-in-command, Marcus, knocked twice before entering the study. Marcus was built similarly to Adrian but carried himself with the careful deference of someone who understood the hierarchy that governed their world. "Alpha, we have a situation," he said, closing the door behind him. Adrian turned, his expression unreadable. "The hunters?" "No, something different. A human girl crossed into our territory about an hour ago, near the northern ridge. She's terrified, soaked through," and Marcus paused, his brow furrowing. "The patrol said something seemed off about her. Said there was something in the air when they found her." Adrian felt his entire body go rigid. "What do you mean, off?" "I don't know how to explain it, sir. They said the closer they got to her, the more their wolves reacted. Not aggressive, more like interested. Intensely interested." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Adrian gripped the edge of his desk, and the wood groaned beneath his fingers, splintering. He forced himself to breathe. "Where is she?" "Security holding room. We didn't know what else to do. She's human, and she wandered into werewolf territory during a full moon cycle. She's either incredibly stupid or incredibly desperate." Adrian was already moving toward the door. "Show me." The compound was a sprawling estate hidden deep in the Cascade Mountains, designed to look like a luxury resort from the outside but functioning as a fortress from within. The security holding room was nestled in the east wing, accessible only through coded doors, and guarded by their most trusted warriors. As Adrian descended the stairs with Marcus at his shoulder, he felt his wolf pushing harder against his skin, clawing at him from the inside out. The door to the holding room hissed open, and Adrian Blackstone, alpha of the Blackstone Pack, the most powerful werewolf in the Pacific Northwest, the man who had fought and bled and conquered, felt his entire world shift on its axis. She was sitting on the edge of a cot, her back to him. And even before he saw her face, something primal inside him roared to life. His wolf knew her. His very soul knew her. The scent hit him like a physical force, something uniquely hers, warm and sweet with notes of cinnamon and honey, with an undertone of something wild and untamed that called to the beast inside him. It was impossible. He was looking at his mate. She turned at the sound of the door, and Adrian's breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost accidental, like she'd stumbled into her own perfection without realizing it. She had long, dark hair that fell in waves down her back, currently soaked and clinging to her pale shoulders. Her eyes were a striking amber brown, wide and frightened, but shot through with threads of gold that seemed to glow in the fluorescent light. She was small, delicate, almost draped in one of the compound's oversized sweatshirts that made her look even more fragile. "Who?" she started, her voice hoarse from screaming or crying. Adrian couldn't tell. Then she saw his face fully, and her eyes widened further. Her hand flew to her chest, and her breathing became shallow and rapid. "You," she whispered. Adrian had never heard his own name sound like a prayer before, but hearing it in her trembling voice did something to him. His wolf surged forward, and it took every ounce of his alpha strength to keep the transformation at bay. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice deeper than usual, rougher. He stayed in the doorway, not trusting himself to move closer. Not yet. His body was already reacting to her presence in ways he couldn't control. Sophie, she said. "Sophie Hartley. I didn't mean to. I was running from something. And I didn't see the fence. And then there were those men outside in the rain. And I've never been so scared in my life. And now I'm here, and you're," she trailed off, staring at him like he was a ghost. Her hand reached out without her permission, then fell back to her side. This doesn't make any sense. No, Adrian said quietly. But it will. I promise you, it will. Behind him, Marcus made a small, confused sound. Adrian didn't look away from Sophie, couldn't look away. It was like trying to look away from the sun. What's happening? Sophie asked. Her voice shook. Why do I feel like I know you? I've never seen you before in my life. But it's like my entire body recognizes you. Adrian stepped into the room, and Sophie stood up, her eyes never leaving his. They were breathing the same air now, and his wolf was pacing frantically inside his chest, desperate to get closer to her, to claim her, to make her his in every way possible. He forced himself to stop a few feet away, even though every fiber of his being screamed at him to close the distance. My name is Adrian Blackstone, he said. And I think you need to sit down, because I'm about to tell you something that's going to change your entire understanding of reality. Sophie sank back onto the cot without breaking eye contact. I'm not going to like this, am I? Adrian felt something that might have been a smile tug at the corner of his mouth. Even terrified, even in a holding room in a building full of monsters, she had her wits about her. His mate was brave. No, he said. But it's going to feel like the most right thing that's ever happened to you. Sophie's hands wouldn't stop shaking as Adrian explained the impossible. She sat on the cot, and he pulled up a chair, positioning himself close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body, but not so close that she felt cornered. He told her about werewolves like it was the weather forecast. Matter of fact, logical, as if her entire universe wasn't imploding. You're telling me, Sophie said slowly, carefully, like she was speaking to someone who might be insane, that you're a werewolf, that you turn into a wolf, that your entire family, your entire community of people, are werewolves. Not a community. A pack. Adrian corrected gently. And yes, everything I'm telling you is true. You can feel it, can't you? That's why you knew me the moment you saw my face. Sophie wanted to argue, but she couldn't. The truth was written in her body's reaction to him. Her heart rate hadn't normalized since he walked in the door. Her skin felt hypersensitive, aware of every inch of space between them. She felt like she was vibrating at a frequency only he could match. Why can I feel it? She asked. Adrian leaned forward, and she caught his scent, something dark and smoky, and dangerously masculine. Like forests after a storm. Because you're my mate, Sophie. And I'm your mate. It's a bond that exists at a level that goes beyond anything in the human world. The wolf recognizes its match at a soul level. It's rare, rarer than you'd think, even for us. That's... Sophie stood up abruptly, pacing the small room. That's insane. That's romantic movie dialogue. That's not real. I don't even know you. I don't even... She ran her hands through her wet hair, trying to think, trying to parse any of this into something her brain could accept. Why did you bring me here? What are you going to do with me? Protect you, Adrian said simply. He remained seated, giving her space, though it clearly cost him. His jaw was clenched, the muscle ticking. The question is, are you in danger? Why were you running through the forest in the rain like your life depended on it? Sophie stopped pacing. She looked at Adrian, really looked at him, and saw the genuine concern in his expression. The protectiveness radiating off him wasn't an act. He meant what he said. He would protect her. The realization made something in her chest crack open. My ex-boyfriend, she said quietly. His name is Derek. We broke up 6 months ago. And he couldn't accept it. Tonight, he showed up at my apartment. He was drunk, and he was angry, and when I told him to leave, he put his hands on me, grabbed me. I managed to get away, and I just ran. I got in my car and I drove until I ran off the road. And then, I was in the forest, and I was so disoriented, I didn't know where I was going. Adrian's eyes flashed silver. His hands clenched into fists on his thighs, and Sophie saw the claws start to slide from beneath his fingernails before he forced them back. The transformation happened so quickly it was barely visible, but it was there, a glimpse of the predator beneath the man. He touched you without your consent, Adrian said, his voice deadly quiet. He tried to hurt you. He didn't. I got away, Sophie said quickly. Though part of her was fascinated by the violent protectiveness radiating off him, no man had ever reacted like that when she told them about Derek. None of them had ever made her feel like her safety was the most important thing in the world. That changes nothing, Adrian said. Not here, not on my territory, not with you. Sophie felt her cheeks flush. What does that mean, exactly? What am I, now? Are we, is this a marriage thing? Adrian stood up, and despite her attempt to give him space, the room seemed to shrink. He was so big, so much more substantial than any man she'd ever met. When he looked at her, it felt like he was looking into her very soul. It's everything, he said quietly. A mate bond is the deepest connection possible. It means I would die for you. It means your pain is my pain. It means I would burn the world to ash to keep you safe. It means you're the other half of my soul, Sophie. And if you'll have me, I will spend the rest of your lifetime proving to you that you made the right choice. Sophie's breath caught. She wanted to say something, anything, but her throat was too tight. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever made her feel like she was worth that kind of devotion. What if I'm not? Sophie started. What if I don't feel the same way? Adrian stepped closer, and Sophie didn't back away. Do you feel it? He asked. He reached out, his hand lifting her chin with surprising gentleness. Tell me you don't feel it. Sophie looked into his silver eyes, and she felt the truth rise up inside her. She did feel it. She felt it like a physical force, like a chain wrapped around her heart, like lightning in her veins. I feel something, she admitted. But I don't understand it. I don't understand any of this. Then let me help you understand, Adrian said. Let me take care of you. Let me show you what it means to be with someone who is wholly and completely yours. He lowered his head, and Sophie knew he was going to kiss her. She should have said no. She should have said she needed time. She should have said this was insane, but when his lips touched hers, every rational thought fled her mind. The kiss was like coming home. It was like discovering a piece of herself she didn't know was missing. Adrian kissed her, like she was precious, like she was sacred, his large hand cradling her face while his other hand splayed across her lower back. Sophie found herself pressing against him, her fingers curling into his shirt, and she felt him shudder against her like he was barely holding himself together. When they broke apart, Sophie was breathing hard. Okay, she said. Okay. I'm going to need a lot of answers. And possibly a very strong drink. But, okay. Adrian rested his forehead against hers, and she could feel him trembling. Thank you. Thank you, Sophie. Marcus, who was still standing in the doorway with an expression of utter shock on his face, finally spoke. Alpha, should I give you two some privacy? Adrian and Sophie both looked at him, and somehow they managed not to laugh. By the time the sun rose over the Cascade Mountains, Sophie had been given a thorough introduction to the Blackstone Pack compound. Adrian didn't let her out of his sight, his hand finding hers every opportunity he got, like he needed to touch her to believe she was real. The physical connection between them was almost painful in its intensity, a live wire of electricity that ran through her every time their skin made contact. The compound was like stepping into another world. From the outside, it looked like a luxury mountain retreat, all clean lines and expensive furnishings. But inside, it was a fortress. The lower levels contained training facilities, a state-of-the-art medical wing, and a command center that looked like it belonged in a spy thriller. The upper levels held residences, a kitchen that could feed an army, and recreational areas that rivaled five-star resorts. Adrian showed her to his private quarters, a sprawling suite at the top of the East Tower with windows that overlooked the entire mountain range. His bedroom was massive, dominated by a bed that could fit 4 people comfortably. His bathroom had a shower big enough for 10, and his walk-in closet was larger than Sophie's entire apartment. It's a lot, Adrian said, watching her take it all in. I know. It's overwhelming. But this is your home now. You live here with me. We've known each other for 4 hours, Sophie said, not looking away from the view. I'm not moving in with you. You're already here, Adrian pointed out. The amusement in his voice told her he wasn't trying to be difficult, just stating facts. And you can't leave. The human world isn't safe for you now. Not with Derek knowing you were running through the forest. Not with the possibility of other packs discovering your connection to me. Sophie turned to face him. So I'm a prisoner? You're protected, Adrian corrected. He crossed the room and pulled her against his chest, his arms surrounding her like a cage made of warmth and safety. There's a difference. You can go anywhere in this compound you want. You can meet the pack. You can make friends. You can build a life here. But leaving territory? Going back into the human world? That puts both of us at risk. Sophie wanted to argue, but the truth was, she didn't want to leave. She'd been running from Derek for months, terrified of what he might do, constantly looking over her shoulder. The idea of staying in a place where she was safe, where she was wanted, where her mate would literally burn the world to protect her, it was intoxicating. What about my job? She asked. My apartment, my life. We'll handle it, Adrian said. Marcus can send someone to collect your things. Your job, what do you do? I'm a graphic designer. Freelance. Then you can work from here. I have a state-of-the-art office set up. You'll have everything you need. Sophie, I'm not trying to trap you. I'm trying to keep you safe. There's a difference. He was right, and she hated that she knew it. Sophie pulled back enough to look at him. I need to make a call. To my best friend. I need to tell her I'm okay. Adrian nodded. Of course, come on. We'll call from my office. The office was another impressive room, all dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling bookcases, and a massive desk made of some kind of black stone. Adrian handed Sophie his personal phone and stepped out to give her privacy, though she knew he'd be listening anyway. Werewolf senses. She was going to have to get used to that. Her best friend, Lily, answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. Sophie? Jesus, it's 6 a.m. What's wrong? Sophie sat on the edge of Adrian's desk and told her a carefully edited version of the truth. She'd run off the road to escape Derek. She'd been rescued by people in the area. She was safe, and staying with them for a while. Are you sure you're okay? Lily demanded. Because your voice sounds weird. You sound like you've been crying, and also like you're in some kind of fever dream. I'm okay, Sophie said, and realized she meant it. I'm really okay, Lily. I've never felt safer, or stranger, both at the same time. There's someone there, Lily said, her tone shifting to match her friend's excitement. Oh my God. Oh my God. You've met someone. Who is it? What is he like? His name is Adrian. He's... Sophie looked through the glass partition into the office, where Adrian was pretending not to listen. He caught her eye, and gave her a knowing smile. He's everything, Lily. I don't understand it, but he's everything. Well, he better be treating you right, because I will absolutely hurt a man, Lily said fiercely. Even if you've only known him for a few hours. Better yet, especially because you've only known him for a few hours. Sophie laughed despite herself. He's treating me like I'm made of glass and gold. I promise. They talked a bit longer, and when Sophie hung up, she felt better. Adrian came back into the office, and she handed him his phone. Your friend cares about you, he observed. She's worried I've lost my mind, Sophie said. Which, fair point, have you? Sophie thought about it. A week ago, her biggest concern was whether Derek would finally leave her alone. Now she was in a compound full of werewolves, claimed by an alpha male who radiated danger and possession like his personal cologne. By any reasonable metric, she had lost her mind. And yet, it felt like she'd finally found it. Ask me again in a week, she said. Adrian pulled her toward the door. Come on! It's time you met the pack. They're dying to see the woman who finally stopped the great Adrian Blackstone from his eternal solitude. The pack gathering was held in the compound's great hall, a massive space with exposed beams and a stone fireplace that rose 3 stories high. There were at least 200 people there, men and women of all ages, all radiating that same subtle something offness that Sophie now recognized as being werewolf. The moment Adrian walked in, with Sophie's hand firmly grasped in his, the entire room went quiet. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, loaded with meaning. Pack! Adrian said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the hall. I present to you my mate, Sophie Hartley. The reactions were immediate and varied. Some people smiled, some looked shocked. A few older women, mostly actually looked emotional, their eyes glistening. A teenage girl in the back started actually crying tears of happiness. One man stepped forward, and Sophie recognized Marcus from the previous night. He was smiling now, seemingly genuinely happy for his alpha. Welcome to the Blackstone Pack, Sophie. We're honored to meet you. Others approached, introducing themselves. There was Elena, Adrian's gamma, a woman with short black hair and a fierce smile, who immediately began explaining the hierarchy of the pack. There were hunters and scouts, guardians and healers, each with their own role in the larger structure. There were mates who had joined the pack like Sophie. Humans who had bonded with their werewolf partners and found a home here. They seemed to gravitate towards Sophie, offering support and solidarity. "It's overwhelming at first," one woman named Rebecca told her. Rebecca had kind eyes and a knowing smile. She'd bonded with a werewolf named David 5 years ago. "I cried for 3 days straight. I thought I was insane. But then I realized I was just in love. Once I accepted that, everything else fell into place." Sophie was starting to relax when a voice cut through the crowd like a knife. "So the almighty Adrian Blackstone has finally taken a mate." The speaker was a man who looked to be in his late 40s, with silver streaking his dark hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And she's human. How? Interesting." Adrian's entire body went rigid. His hand squeezed Sophie's so hard she almost yelped. The temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees. "Victor," Adrian said, his voice carefully neutral. "I didn't realize you were still in the compound." Victor stepped forward, and Sophie felt Adrian position himself slightly in front of her, shielding her. "I live here, as you know. I'm the pack elder. It would be remiss of me not to meet our alpha's new mate. Tell me, Sophie." He looked directly at her, his eyes a strange shade of gray that reminded her of ash. "Do you understand what you're taking on? Do you know what he is? What he's capable of?" "Victor," Adrian said, a note of warning in his voice. "She should know," Victor continued, ignoring Adrian completely. "She should know that being mated to an alpha means bearing witness to things that would break a normal human. She should know that she'll be expected to give him heirs. Powerful heirs. She should know that she's not just gaining a mate, she's gaining an entire burden of expectation." Sophie felt her temper flare. She pulled her hand away from Adrian and stepped forward, getting right into Victor's personal space. "I think what she should know," Sophie said, her voice cold and clear, "is that she's not an object to be bartered for or warned away from. I think she gets to make her own choices. And right now, my choice is not to listen to a man who clearly has issues he needs to work through." The room went absolutely silent. Sophie could feel Adrian behind her, could feel him wanting to grab her and pull her back, but also she felt something else. Pride. Respect. Approval. Victor's face flushed with anger. "Disrespectful. Direct," Sophie corrected. "There's a difference. And yes, I know what Adrian is. I know he's a werewolf. I know he can turn into a wolf. I know he's big and scary and has a lot of responsibility. And I'm choosing him anyway. Not because I have to, because I want to. So if you have a problem with that, Victor, that's your issue to work through, not mine." Adrian's hand came down on her shoulder, and his voice was the purr of a predator that had spotted prey. "Are we going to have a problem, Victor?" Victor held Sophie's gaze for another moment before dropping his eyes. "No, Alpha, my apologies. I forget that humans lack proper filter when they're newly bonded. It's charming." He walked away, and the moment he left the hall, the tension seemed to drain from the room. People started talking again, though the energy was different now. Several of the younger pack members looked at Sophie with something like awe. "That was incredibly brave," Adrian whispered in her ear. "Also incredibly stupid. Victor is dangerous. So are you," Sophie said. "But you're not going to hurt me." "No," Adrian agreed. "I would sooner cut off my own arm. But that doesn't mean I'm not dangerous." That night, Adrian took Sophie to the highest point of the compound, a viewing deck that overlooked the entire valley. They stood together, watching the stars come out, her back against his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Claiming me as your mate? I'm obviously going to be trouble. I'm human. I'm outspoken. I don't follow rules I don't understand." "Not for a second," Adrian said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "My wolf is purring, Sophie. He purrs because he has you, and you're his. You're ours. Nothing else matters." 3 weeks into her new life with the Blackstone pack, Sophie found herself in a hunting party. She didn't fully transform like the others did. That particular gift took more time for a human to develop, if it happened at all. But Adrian had arranged for her to ride along in the forest while the wolves hunted. "Are you sure about this?" Adrian asked, helping her into the saddle of a pure black horse named Storm. They were at the edge of the compound, where the forest began in earnest. The moon was 3/4 full, and Sophie could feel the energy crackling through the pack members around her. On nights like this, they became their truest selves. "I want to understand this," Sophie said. "I want to understand what you are, what we are." Adrian nodded. understanding. He kissed her hand one last time before stepping back. His eyes flashed silver, and then his body began to shift. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing Sophie had ever seen. His body lengthened and reformed, his clothes ripping away, and where a man had stood seconds before, an enormous wolf now stood. He was silver-gray with hints of darker silver along his spine, and he was easily the size of a small car. Sophie gasped, despite knowing what was coming. Adrian the wolf made a rumbling sound that vibrated through Sophie's entire being, and she realized, with surprise, that it was laughter. Then the pack ran. The horses kept up with surprising ease, trained specifically for this purpose. Sophie had Elena on one side of her, and Marcus on a horse of his own on the other side, both already transformed into their wolf forms. The pack moved through the forest like liquid silver, utterly silent, perfectly coordinated. It was a symphony of predators in their element. Sophie watched Adrian hunt a elk, watched him work in perfect coordination with 3 other wolves to bring the massive animal down. It should have been horrifying. Instead, it was magnificent. There was no malice in it, no cruelty. It was simply life, the way nature intended predator and prey, the ancient dance of survival. When the hunt ended and they returned to the compound, Adrian transformed back into his human form and pulled Sophie off her horse immediately. He pressed her against his chest, his skin still warm despite the cool night air. "Did you see?" he asked. "Did you understand?" "You were magnificent," Sophie said, running her hands over his shoulders, feeling the power still radiating through him. "You were terrible, and beautiful, and magnificent." Adrian growled, literally growled in approval. He picked her up and carried her inside, ignoring the knowing smiles from the pack members around them. He took her to his quarters, to his shower, and made love to her with the kind of intensity that left her breathless and boneless and utterly his. Later, lying in his bed with his body wrapped around hers, Sophie finally asked the question she'd been avoiding. "When are you going to bite me?" she asked. "To make the bond official?" Adrian went very still. His arms tightened around her. "When you're ready. The bite is permanent, Sophie. It marks you as mine completely. Every werewolf in existence will know you're bonded to me. It's both binding and transformative. Some humans change after the bite. They gain certain abilities, stronger senses, enhanced healing. Some don't. But either way, you'll be tied to me forever." "Is that bad?" Sophie asked. "No," Adrian said softly. "It's perfect. But it has to be your choice. I will never force it." Sophie reached back and pulled his head down so she could kiss him. "Then bite me," she said. "Make me yours." Adrian's breathing became ragged. "Not yet. We need to do this right. There's a ceremony. The pack gathers. I need you to be sure." Sophie turned to face him fully. "I'm sure now." But Adrian was already pulling back, already putting distance between them. "I know you are, but I'm not. Give me time to prepare, Sophie. Let me do this the way you deserve." 2 weeks later, as Sophie prepared for her mating ceremony, something shifted. She started noticing things, hushed conversations that stopped when she entered rooms, glances exchanged between pack members that felt laden with meaning. Adrian was tenser than usual, and when she asked him what was wrong, he gave her evasive answers. "Is Victor causing problems again?" Sophie asked. She'd had several confrontations with Victor since their first meeting, and each one had left her with the sense that he was planning something. "Not Victor," Adrian said carefully. "Something else." But he wouldn't elaborate, and it was driving her crazy. Sophie decided to do what she'd learned to do in her 3 weeks in the compound. She asked the right people. She found Elena in the training grounds and pulled her aside. "Talk to me," Sophie said. "Something's wrong. Adrian won't tell me, so you will." Elena, who had become something of a friend despite her alpha female status, sighed. "The Northern Pack is making noise. They're led by an alpha named Dominic Vale, and he's ambitious. He's been making territorial claims that encroach on our lands. Adrian's been meeting with him to try to negotiate, but negotiations are getting heated." "Does that mean war?" Sophie asked. "It could," Elena said. "Packs have fought over territory before, but Adrian's hoping to avoid it. The problem is, if you mate with Adrian officially, if he bites you and completes the bond, it will be seen as a show of strength. Some packs respect that. Others see it as a challenge. So I'm the problem," Sophie said bitterly. "No," Elena said firmly. "You're the solution. Or you will be. A strong mate makes an alpha stronger. Dominic's mate is weak, she's human, but there's no fire in her. She was selected for political advantage, not for true bonding. When word gets out that Adrian's mate came to him through true bonding, that she's already proven herself willing to stand up to pack elders, that changes the game. Sophie walked back to Adrian's quarters in a daze. She found him standing on the balcony, staring out at the mountains with an expression of deep concentration. "Tell me about Dominic Vale," she said without preamble. Adrian closed his eyes. "Elena talked to you?" "Yes. And I'd appreciate it if you'd tell me the truth. I'm part of this pack now. I'm about to become your official mate. I deserve to know what we're facing." Adrian turned to face her. "Dominic is a predator. He has no real interest in boundary agreements or peaceful coexistence. He wants power, and he's willing to take it however he can. He's been making moves toward our territory for months, testing our response times, trying to provoke a conflict. Then we fight," Sophie said simply. "It's not that simple," Adrian said. "Yes, we could fight. We'd probably win. The Blackstone pack is strong, and I'm one of the oldest and most experienced alphas in the country. But war means casualties, means deaths, means that some of the people you've come to care about might not come home." Sophie understood the weight of that, and it shook her. She'd never had to consider the cost of decisions on that scale before. "So what's the alternative?" "We show strength without provocation," Adrian said. "We make a show of power that convinces him we're not worth the risk. Your mating ceremony, the completion of the bond, that's part of that. If word spreads that I've bonded with a human mate through true connection, not political arrangement, it sends a message. It says I'm confident, I'm settled, I'm not a threat to be afraid of or provoked into rashness. I'm a pawn," Sophie said, though she didn't say it with anger. "You're my mate," Adrian said, crossing the space between them. "Everything else is secondary to that. But yes, strategically speaking, your existence here matters. Your bond matters. Your strength in standing up to Victor, your quick mind, your willingness to fight, it all matters. I won't lie to you about that." Sophie nodded slowly. She'd come too far to pretend she didn't understand the realities of this world. "When is the ceremony?" "Tomorrow night," Adrian said. "Under the full moon, in front of the entire pack." Sophie felt her heart accelerate. After months of waiting, it was finally happening. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready since the moment I smelled you in that holding room," Adrian said. "The question is, are you ready?" Sophie reached up and pulled his head down to hers. "Mark me," she whispered against his lips. "Make me yours." Adrian pulled back. "No. Not like this. Not when you're uncertain. Tomorrow night, in front of everyone, under the full moon. That's when I'll claim you properly. That's when you'll become the Luna of the Blackstone pack." Sophie woke on the day of her mating ceremony to find her chambers had been transformed overnight. Flowers, white roses, and silver lilies covered every available surface. The bed was draped in silk the color of moonlight, and draped over the back of a chair was the most breathtaking dress she'd ever seen. It was made of some kind of flowing material that seemed to shimmer between silver and white, with delicate beading that caught the light like starshine. The neckline was modest but elegant, and the back was entirely open except for two thin straps, leaving her shoulder blades bare. It was the dress of a goddess. "Do you like it?" a voice asked from the doorway. Sophie turned to find Rebecca, the kind human mate she'd befriended weeks ago, standing in the entrance with a warm smile. "It's beautiful," Sophie breathed. "I don't even know where to start." "We start with breakfast," Rebecca said, coming in with a tray laden with fresh fruit and pastries. "Then we bathe you in the ritual oils. Then we dress you. And then," she smiled mysteriously, "then you become a Luna." The day passed in a blur of preparation. Sophie was soaked in a bath infused with rose petals and jasmine. Her skin was oiled with something that made her glow. Her hair was brushed until it shone like silk, and woven through it were delicate chains of silver with tiny moonstones attached. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked ethereal, she looked powerful, she looked like a Luna. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the women of the pack came to escort her to the ceremony grounds. It was held in a natural amphitheater deep in the forest, a massive clearing with an ancient stone altar at its center. The full moon was already rising, massive and luminous in the darkening sky. There had to be at least 500 people gathered, werewolves from packs across the region, having come to witness the bonding of an alpha to his true mate. The clearing was ringed with torches, and as Sophie walked down the natural aisle, every head turned to watch her. Adrian stood at the altar, and Sophie's breath caught in her throat. He was wearing formal clothing, black pants, and a deep red shirt that was unbuttoned at the chest, revealing the powerful lines of his torso. His dark hair had been combed back from his face, and his silver eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. He looked like something pulled straight from myth, like a warrior king or a dark deity. The moment their eyes met, Sophie felt the connection between them hum and tighten. Her bond with Adrian was already strong, but standing before him dressed as his mate, with the entire werewolf world watching, it became something tangible, something undeniable. Adrian reached out and took her hand, and the crowd fell silent. An elder, a woman with silver hair and wise eyes, stepped forward to conduct the ceremony. We gather under the full moon to witness the bonding of Alpha Adrian Blackstone of the Blackstone Pack and Sophie Hartley, his fated mate, the elder said, her voice carrying to every corner of the clearing. In the eyes of the moon goddess, before the packs assembled here, we acknowledge the truth of this union. These two are bound by soul and spirit. They are one, complete. Adrian turned to face Sophie fully, his hands gripping hers. Sophie, you came into my life like a storm, unexpected and perfect. You challenge me. You complete me. You are my other half, my mate, my Luna. Do you accept this bond? Do you accept me? I do, Sophie said, and her voice was steady and strong. I accept you, Adrian. All of you. The dangerous alpha. The protective predator. The man who would burn the world for me. I accept it all. I accept you. Adrian's eyes flashed completely silver. His voice dropped to a growl. Then let all know what is mine. He pulled her close, bending his head to the junction of her neck and shoulder, where her collarbone met her throat. Sophie tilted her head, exposing the vulnerable curve of her neck completely. She could feel his teeth against her skin, could feel the beast struggling at the leash of his humanity. And then, with a sound that was part groan and part howl, Adrian bit her. The pain was sharp and immediate, white-hot and all-consuming, but it was quickly replaced by something else, pleasure so intense it bordered on overwhelming. Sophie gasped, her fingers digging into Adrian's shoulders, her entire body arching into his as he drank from her, sealing their bond with the primal exchange that marked her as Luna. The watching crowd erupted. Howls tore from the throats of 100 wolves, a sound of celebration and acceptance and primal joy that echoed through the mountains. When Adrian pulled back, his eyes were brighter than Sophie had ever seen them. There was blood at the corner of his mouth, and when he looked at her, she saw possession and love and obsession all wrapped up in that burning silver gaze. Mine, he said, and it was a statement of fact. You're mine. Everyone here knows it. You're Luna, of the Blackstone Pack, bonded to me in the sight of all. Sophie felt the transformation immediately. Her senses exploded suddenly. She could smell the individual scents of hundreds of people around them, could hear conversations being whispered across the clearing, could feel the heartbeats of everyone in the amphitheater like they were her own. The world became hyper-real, hypersensitive, intoxicating. It's okay, Adrian murmured, sensing her overwhelm. Just breathe. Your new mate will help you adjust. The ceremony continued with feasting and celebration, but Sophie barely registered it. She was too consumed by Adrian, too caught up in the newly solidified bond between them. When he danced with her later as the fire roared and the pack celebrated around them, she felt like they were the only two people in existence. How do you feel? He asked, spinning her in a slow circle. Like I'm on fire, Sophie said. Like I can see the entire world now, like I finally understand why you're so protective. I can feel everyone around us, Adrian. I can sense their intentions, their happiness, their concerns. If anything happened to them, I'd feel it. That's the Luna in you, Adrian said. You're not fully transformed yet, that might take weeks or months, but the bond has awakened something in you. You'll start developing certain abilities, faster healing, enhanced senses, which you're experiencing now. And eventually, if you want it, you might be able to shift. But that takes time. I want to do this right, Sophie said. I want to be a good Luna. I want to earn this. Adrian pulled her closer, and she could feel his heartbeat against her chest. You already have, amore mio. You already have. 3 days after the mating ceremony, the first sign of trouble arrived in the form of a messenger from the northern pack. He was a wolf named Garrett, with the scent of dominance hanging around him like cologne. He carried a challenge, a formal request for a territorial dispute to be settled by single combat. Dominic Vale was invoking an ancient law that stated pack boundaries could be contested through a duel between Alpha and Challenger. He's not serious, Marcus said when Adrian explained it to Sophie in his private study. He can't actually think he can beat you. He's not thinking, Adrian corrected grimly. He's showing strength to his own pack. It's a political move. If he fights me and loses, he loses face but gains notoriety for being brave enough to challenge me. If by some miracle he wins, he gains territory and status. Can you beat him? Sophie asked. Adrian looked at her, and she saw something flicker in his expression. Doubt, maybe, or concern. Yes, but not without risk. Sophie felt cold settle into her bones. What kind of risk? Single combat between alphas is brutal, Sophie. We fight as wolves. We fight to win, and sometimes that means fighting to the death. Dominic is ambitious, but he's also cunning. He wouldn't challenge me if he didn't think he had at least a chance. Then you'll take him down, Sophie said with more confidence than she felt. You're stronger than him. You're older. You're smarter. Yes, Adrian agreed. But Sophie, if something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, Sophie interrupted, moving to him and cupping his face in her hands. You're the alpha. You're my mate. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You'll beat him. Adrian pulled her against him, and she could feel him trembling slightly. The mate bond was working both ways now. She could sense his emotions, his concerns, his fear not for himself but for her. If something happened to him, she would be tied to that death forever. The realization was terrifying. The challenge was set for 1 week out. The duel would be held at the neutral boundary between the Blackstone Pact territory and the Northern Pact territory. But instead of waiting passively, Adrian threw himself into preparation. Sophie watched him train with his warriors. She saw him run the perimeter of his territory, marking it with his scent, reinforcing the spiritual boundaries that kept intruders out. She saw him meet with his elders, Victor included, though Victor seemed more sympathetic now that the threat was external rather than from within. He's scared, Sophie said to Elena one afternoon as they watched Adrian spar with Marcus. The two wolves were a blur of teeth and claws, moving with incredible speed. Of course he is, Elena said. Not of losing he won't lose. He's scared because he now has something to lose. Before you, he was willing to die for the pack but not terrified of it. Now he has a mate, someone he loves more than his own life. That makes him vulnerable. Sophie watched Adrian take a hit, watched him shake it off and come back stronger. I don't want to be his weakness. You're not, Elena said gently. You're his strength. Every wolf he fights for now will remember that you're his Luna. Every warrior he leads will fight harder, knowing their alpha is fighting for love as well as territory. You're not a weakness, Sophie. You're his reason. The night before the duel, Sophie couldn't sleep. She lay next to Adrian in their bed, listening to him breathe, feeling his heartbeat through the mate bond. He was asleep, at least in his human form, but she could feel his wolf pacing inside him, ready for the coming fight. She got out of bed carefully and walked out onto the balcony. The night was clear and cool, and the stars seemed to stretch on forever. She found Adrian's wolf there, in his half-shifted form caught between man and beast, his face still somewhat human but his body larger, covered in fur. His eyes were completely silver. You should be resting, he said, his voice a rumbling purr. So should you, Sophie replied. She walked down to the grass where he waited and pressed herself against his side. His form was warm despite the cool night air. Talk to me, Adrian said, shifting fully back to human form and wrapping his arms around her. Tell me what you're thinking. I'm thinking that I love you, Sophie said. And I'm thinking that I'm going to spend the rest of my life terrified that something is going to take you away from me. And I'm thinking that I'm furious that we don't get more time, that we just got bonded, and now you have to go fight for your life. Adrian held her tighter. Come with me tomorrow. I want you there. I want to see your face. I want to know you're safe, watching from the sidelines. What if you need me? Sophie asked. What if I can help? You can help by being alive, by being whole, by being waiting for me when I come back, Adrian said firmly. Sophie, I need to know that if something happens to me, you'll keep living, you'll take care of yourself, you'll let the pack take care of you. Sophie wanted to promise him that, but she couldn't. Because she knew with absolute certainty that if Adrian died, a part of her would die with him. The mate bond didn't allow for such simple solutions as moving on. Instead, She pulled him back inside and made love to him with the kind of desperation that comes from knowing that tomorrow might change everything. And Adrian responded in kind, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world, which she was. The neutral ground was a valley between territories, marked by ancient stones that had stood there for centuries. As Sophie arrived with the Blackstone pack, she saw the northern pack already assembled at least 300 strong, with their alpha at the forefront. Dominic Vale was impressive in his own right. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of handsome but dangerous face that came from a lifetime of not having to play by civilized rules. He had the look of someone used to winning, and his mate, a small, beautiful woman with frightened eyes, stood beside him looking like she wished she could disappear. Adrian emerged from the Blackstone contingent in his human form, completely nude and unashamed. His body was a map of his power muscles like carved stone, bearing the marks of countless battles fought over 2 centuries of life. His silver eyes swept across the assembled crowds and landed on Sophie. He nodded once, a gesture that meant everything. I see you. I'm fighting for us. Dominic stripped as well, and the 2 alphas faced each other across the neutral ground. An elder from the council, someone respected by both packs, stepped forward to officiate. The terms are simple, the elder said. Single combat between alpha and challenger. The victor gains the contested territory. The loser either concedes or dies. There is no third option. Do both parties accept? I accept, Adrian said, his voice steady. I accept, Dominic agreed, and his eyes were full of calculating ambition. The transformation happened simultaneously. Both men's bodies twisted and reformed, their clothes falling away as their wolf forms emerged. Adrian was massive, pure silver with dark undertones along his spine, but Dominic was larger, his coat a deep charcoal with hints of red, his frame built more for raw power than Adrian's leaner elegance. They circled each other once, twice, sizing each other up. The assembled packs were absolutely silent, holding their breath. Then they attacked. It was violence and beauty wrapped together. Adrian moved like liquid death, every movement calculated and precise. Dominic came at him like a berserker, all power and fury. Their bodies collided, and Sophie heard the crack of impact echo across the valley. Blood flew, fur matted with it. Sophie couldn't look away. She watched Adrian take a slash across his side that bled freely. She watched him twist and catch Dominic by the shoulder, tearing a strip of flesh away. She watched them fight with the kind of intensity that made the watching crowds gasp. Elena was beside Sophie, her hand gripping Sophie's arm. He's winning, she said urgently. Look at his posture. He's controlling the pace. But Sophie could feel through the mate bond that Adrian was hurt more badly than it appeared. The wound on his side was deep, and he was losing blood faster than he should be. And Dominic seemed to realize it, seemed to zero in on that injury, attacking it relentlessly, trying to make Adrian bleed out. Sophie's Luna instincts screamed at her to do something, anything. And then she felt it, a presence in her mind that hadn't been there before. The collective consciousness of the Blackstone pack. All of them, linked through their pack bond. All of them focused on their alpha. Sophie reached out toward that connection, and felt her voice amplify through all of them. She sent Adrian strength. She sent him love. She sent him the certainty that they would all be waiting for him to come home. And she felt the pack echo that message back, sending it through the alpha in a wave of unified support. Adrian seemed to straighten. He seemed to find reserves he didn't know he had. And then he moved faster than Sophie's eyes could quite follow, and he had Dominic pinned on his back, his jaws closing around Dominic's throat. He didn't bite down. He could have. The match would have been over in seconds. Instead, he held the position, giving Dominic a choice. Submit or die. Dominic whimpered a sound of surrender, of submission, of acceptance of defeat. Adrian released him and transformed back to human form, standing over the broken wolf with silver eyes that blazed with victory. The Blackstone pack holds its territory, the elder announced. Let it be known that Adrian Blackstone is the stronger alpha. The challenge is resolved. Dominic transformed back to human form, his body covered in blood, his face twisted with fury but accepting his loss. His own pack would enforce the submission, and he would be bound by it. As Adrian walked back toward Sophie, she could see the serious wound on his side, the way he was favoring his left leg, the blood that covered his entire body. He reached her and pulled her close, not caring who saw, not caring about the gathered crowds. I felt you, he said. Your strength, your love. It saved me. Let's get you healed, Sophie said. her Luna instincts taking over. She snapped commands at the pack healers, and they immediately rushed forward with medical supplies. They took Adrian to a tent that had been prepared, and Sophie stayed with him as they stitched his wounds and applied healing salves. "Lie with me," Adrian said, once the healers had finished. "Just lie with me." Sophie curled against his uninjured side, her head on his chest, her hand over his heart. She could feel it beating strong and true beneath her palm. "You're okay," she whispered, not quite believing it. "You won. You're alive. Because of you," Adrian said. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Always because of you now, Sophie. You're the reason I'm still breathing." Adrian healed with the supernatural speed of the werewolf, and by the next day, most of his wounds had already begun to close. The deeper lacerations would take longer, but he was up and moving by morning, insisting on returning to the compound with his pack. Sophie stayed with him constantly, using her newly developed powers to help soothe his wolf, to help the healing process along. She discovered she had an affinity for pack medicine, the ability to direct her healing energy into an injured packmate. It was like discovering a hidden talent she didn't know she possessed. But victory came with unexpected complications. The first sign was when a delegation from the Northern Pack showed up at the Blackstone compound 3 days after the duel. Dominic came himself, along with several of his warriors and his mate, Chloe. Adrian received them in the great hall with Sophie at his side, her hand resting on his arm. To the uninformed observer, she was there to support her mate. In reality, she was there to read the room, to use her new Luna instincts to sense deception or danger. "I acknowledge your victory," Dominic said, and his words were formal, binding in werewolf law. "The Northern Pack recognizes the Blackstone Pack's claim to the contested territory. I've come to make amends." "Accepted," Adrian said neutrally. But then Dominic turned to Chloe and made a gesture. The small, frightened human woman stepped forward, and Sophie's breath caught. "I cannot lead my pack as an alpha with a weak mate," Dominic said. "This one was a political arrangement. She serves no purpose now. I'm asking if you would consider taking her into the Blackstone Pack as an Omega." There was a stunned silence. An Omega was the lowest rank in pack hierarchy, not a fighter, not a hunter, but someone who needed protection and care. It was a significant request. Adrian looked at Sophie, deferring to his Luna. This was her decision to make. Sophie stepped forward and looked into Chloe's eyes. What she saw there broke her heart: resignation, fear, a complete lack of hope. This woman had been treated like an object her entire life. Sophie understood that better than most. "Yes," Sophie said. "She stays with us. She'll be under my personal protection." Chloe's eyes filled with tears. After Dominic and his delegation left, Sophie took Chloe to the women's quarters and set her up with Rebecca and some of the other human mates. She could feel Adrian watching her with something like awe when she returned to his study. "You didn't have to do that," Adrian said. "She's not your responsibility." "Yes, I did," Sophie said simply. "And yes, she is. We're Luna, and Luna, in waiting now. That means taking care of the vulnerable in our pack. Besides, I know what it's like to be thrown away by someone who was supposed to protect you. I won't let it happen to her if I can help it." Adrian pulled her into his lap and held her like she was precious, which she knew she was to him. "My fierce Luna, you're going to make me a better alpha." "No," Sophie said. "I'm going to make sure you're the alpha you already are. There's a difference." 2 weeks later, Sophie was going about her daily duties, checking in with pack members, helping with training, working on graphic design projects for the compound's public-facing businesses, when she felt something shift in the mate bond. Adrian was back, she realized. She could feel him entering the territory, and he was emotional, distressed, almost. She rushed to the main entrance and found him talking with Marcus. When he saw her, he pulled her aside into his private study. "Derek was arrested," Adrian said without preamble. Sophie's entire body went cold. "What?" "Derek, your ex-boyfriend, the one who attacked you. Law enforcement picked him up this morning on charges of domestic assault. Apparently, he went after another woman after you disappeared. She filed charges. He violated the restraining order. And everything came to light." "Is she okay?" Sophie asked immediately. "Yes, she survived. He's going to prison for at least 5 years." Sophie sank into a chair. She'd been so focused on her new life, on Adrian, on the pack, that she'd almost forgotten about Derek, almost forgotten about the fear that had driven her into the forest that night. "Thank you for telling me," she said quietly. "That's not all," Adrian said. He sat down across from her. I had our legal team make sure he gets no possibility of parole while you're alive. If he is released after his sentence, he'll have a restraining order that extends across 3 states. And Adrian's voice turned darker. I made sure certain werewolves in the prison system know exactly who he attacked and why. Let's just say he's going to have a very uncomfortable time in there. Sophie felt a surge of fierce love for her mate. So he can never hurt anyone again. Not here, not on my watch, Adrian said. That night, Sophie slept better than she had in months. For the first time since that night in the forest, she didn't have fear looking over her shoulder. She had a mate. She had a pack. She had a purpose. And most importantly, she had safety. 2 months into her life as Luna, Sophie discovered that the role came with more responsibilities than she'd initially anticipated. While Adrian handled the external threats and political negotiations, Sophie found herself responsible for the internal affairs of the pack. It started small. A young wolf injured during training wanted to talk to someone about quitting the warrior track, and the pack hierarchy was too rigid for him to approach anyone in command. He came to Sophie, and she listened, and she helped him find an alternative role in the pack that suited his temperament better. He ended up in the archive, cataloging the pack's historical records, a role that had gone unfilled for years. Then a young mated pair came to her in tears because they'd been trying to conceive for over a year without success, and the pack's healer had given up on them. Sophie convinced the healer, a stubborn man named Dr. Reeves, to try a new approach. 3 months later, the couple was expecting their first child. These small victories added up, and Sophie realized she was changing the culture of the pack in subtle but important ways. She insisted that the warriors have more balanced lives. She started a school for the pack's children that emphasized cooperation rather than just competition. She established a wellness program that focused on the mental health of the pack members, not just their physical prowess. Victor, predictably, objected to everything. "This is not what a Luna does," he said at a pack council meeting. "The Luna bears an alpha's children. She produces heirs. She doesn't meddle in pack politics or establish ridiculous programs that weaken our warriors' competitive spirits. The Luna does whatever the alpha and the pack need her to do," Sophie said calmly. "And what this pack needs is to remember that we're not just warriors and hunters. We're a community. We're a family. And a strong family takes care of all of its members." Adrian reached over and squeezed her hand. "The Luna has spoken. These initiatives continue." Victor looked like he might argue further, but Adrian's expression made it clear that any objection would not be welcomed. Even Victor had his limits. But while Sophie was thriving as Luna, something new was beginning to stir. It started with a dream. She was standing in the forest, and the moon was full and red. A woman with silver eyes and dark hair appeared before her, and Sophie somehow knew, without being told, that this was the moon goddess herself. "There is darkness coming," the goddess said, her voice like wind through trees. "A darkness that will test your bond, test your pack, test the very nature of what you've become. You must be ready, Luna. You must be strong." Sophie woke, gasping, her heart pounding. Adrian was already awake, already pulling her close. "What is it? What did you feel?" "A dream," Sophie said. "Or a vision. I'm not sure which." "Adrian, something bad is coming." Adrian held her tighter, and Sophie could feel his wolf stirring beneath his skin, protective and fierce. "Then we'll face it together. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Over the next few weeks, strange things began happening. Wolves from other packs started appearing on the periphery of Blackstone territory. Nothing overtly threatening, but present. Watching. It was like being studied by something invisible. Marcus brought reports of rogue wolves packs that had broken away from the traditional hierarchy and were operating independently. They were recruiting, growing in numbers, and their ideology was dangerous. They believed werewolves should expose themselves to the human world. They believed the old laws of pack hierarchy were oppressive, and they seemed to be building something. "They're calling themselves the Liberation Front," Marcus said during a council meeting. "And according to our intelligence, they're planning something big, something that could expose our entire species." "Where's their stronghold?" Adrian asked, his voice sharp with authority. "The Sierra Nevada Mountains, about 200 miles south of here. Their alpha is a male named KL. He's old, maybe as old as you, and he's very charismatic. He's convincing other wolves that the human world is ready to know about us, that we should stop hiding." Adrian and Sophie exchanged looks. Sophie could feel his determination through their bond, but she could also feel his concern. This was a threat on a scale they hadn't dealt with before. This was an ideological threat, not just a territorial one. "We need more information," Adrian said. Marcus, I want reconnaissance teams. I want to know everything about this, KL, and his operation. Sophie. He turned to his mate. I need you to work with the pack's elders on a contingency plan. If the humans discover our existence before we're ready to reveal ourselves, it could mean war, not with other packs, but with humanity itself. Sophie felt the weight of that responsibility settle onto her shoulders. This was her role. This was what it meant to be a Luna. As Adrian threw himself into gathering intelligence on the Liberation Front, Sophie found herself at the center of pack governance in a way she hadn't expected. She worked with Victor, and to her surprise, Victor was actually valuable when they weren't actively arguing. His centuries of experience gave him insights into how to handle threats without causing panic among the general pack population. But there were secrets brewing beneath the surface, and Sophie's Luna instincts were picking up on them. She could feel tension in the bond Adrian maintained with his pack, could sense that something wasn't right, and when she followed her instincts to investigate, she discovered something disturbing. Elena was meeting with members of the Liberation Front. Sophie found out almost by accident. She'd been heading to the training grounds when she smelled Elena's scent lingering in one of the restricted tunnels beneath the compound tunnels she knew weren't supposed to be accessed. When she followed the scent, she found a hidden meeting chamber with maps spread across a table and a list of names. Elena's name was there, but so were the names of 7 other pack members. Sophie confronted Elena that night, and the Gamma's expression went through several iterations before settling on resignation. I knew you'd find out eventually, Elena said. They were in Sophie's private study, away from prying eyes. I wasn't trying to hide it forever. You're working with the Liberation Front, Sophie said, not bothering with questions. You're planning something. Not something bad, Elena said. Sophie, you need to understand, the old ways are dying. The human world is advancing. Technology is making it harder and harder to stay hidden. Kyle is right about that much, even if his methods are extreme. So you're a spy, Sophie said flatly. You've been gathering information about our defenses. No, Elena said firmly. I'm not a spy for Kale. I'm a voice for change within our own pack. I want us to develop a contingency plan, to figure out how we could exist publicly if exposure became unavoidable. I want us to be ready, not caught off guard when the human world discovers us. Sophie understood the logic of that argument, but it didn't erase the betrayal. You could have come to me, to Adrian. You could have brought these concerns through proper channels. Would Adrian have listened? Elena asked. He's over 200 years old, Sophie. He's set in his ways. He believes the old laws exist for a reason. He would never seriously consider preparing for exposure. So you lied to him, Sophie said. You violated his trust. I kept secrets, Elena corrected. Secrets are sometimes necessary for the greater good. Sophie stood up, her Luna authority radiating through the room. Those 7 other pack members you've been meeting with. You're going to cease contact immediately. You're going to give me every name, every meeting place, every communication method, and you're going to tell me exactly what KL is planning. Elena looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Sophie's bearing the power of the Luna, the righteous authority of the mate bond made her comply. She wrote down the names. She drew maps of the meeting places, and she told Sophie everything she knew about the Liberation Front's plans. They intended to capture a human journalist and a film crew, expose the truth about werewolves on international television within the month, and then disappear into the wilderness before the human authorities could respond. Their reasoning was that once the world knew the truth, there would be no way to put the knowledge back in the box. Humanity would have to adapt. Sophie's hands were shaking by the time she finished listening. This wasn't just a threat to the Blackstone pack, this was a threat to the entire species. She had to tell Adrian, but when she went to find him, she discovered he was already in a council meeting with Marcus and several of the older warriors. She waited outside his study, trying to figure out how to tell him that one of his most trusted lieutenants had been secretly meeting with enemies of the pack. The door opened, and Adrian stepped out. He took one look at her face and knew something was wrong. My study, now, he said, pulling her inside and locking the door. Sophie told him everything about Elena, about the other pack members, about the plan to expose werewolves to the human world. Adrian's face went through several iterations of expression: shock, hurt, and finally, cold fury. She's been with the pack for 40 years, Adrian said, his voice very quiet. I trusted her completely. She didn't see it as betrayal, Sophie said, not defending Elena but trying to provide context. She saw it as preparing for the inevitable. It is betrayal, Adrian said flatly, and it's treason. The punishment for treason is exile. She's no longer part of the Blackstone pack. Adrian, I know, he said, cutting her off. I know she had good intentions. I know she wasn't meeting with KL to give him information about our defenses. But intention doesn't matter, Sophie. She violated the trust of her Alpha and her Luna. She put the pack at risk. Adrian called for Marcus and gave him the order to exile Elena. The Gamma accepted it with a nod that showed she'd expected as much. By morning, Elena was gone from the compound, disappearing into the world beyond their territory. Sophie felt the loss of her. Elena had been a friend, and now she was gone. But there was no time to grieve. Because now Adrian knew about the Liberation Front, and he was going on the offensive. Adrian decided to confront Kale directly. It was the Alpha in him, direct, unafraid, willing to walk into the lion's den if it meant addressing a threat head-on. Sophie wanted to argue against it, but she knew better. Adrian had to establish dominance, had to make it clear that the Liberation Front's threat would not be tolerated. So they gathered a small contingent of the strongest Blackstone warriors and drove south to the Sierra Nevada mountains where Kale's operation was centered. Sophie insisted on going, and Adrian didn't argue. He knew by now that his Luna was not the type to sit safely on the sidelines. The compound was hidden deep in the mountains, carved into the stone itself. It was less sophisticated than Adrian's compound but larger, sprawling across multiple levels with training grounds and barracks and a central command center. They were met at the entrance by a woman with burnished copper hair and eyes that matched Adrian's silver ones. "Alpha Adrian," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Sienna, Kale's second. We've been expecting you." "Have you?" Adrian said neutrally. "And why would you be expecting me?" "Because Elena told us about you," Sienna said. "She told us that you'd eventually find out about our plans, and that you'd come here thinking you could stop us. She told us you would try to kill Kale, or force us to submit, and she was right, wasn't she?" Sophie felt Adrian's entire body go rigid. Elena had warned them, which meant Elena had been in contact with Kale even after her exile. "Take me to Kale," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. Kale's chambers were at the heart of the compound, and the Alpha himself was even more impressive in person than Sophie had imagined. He was ancient. She could feel the weight of centuries hanging around him like an aura. His hair was silver white, his eyes a pale gold, and his body carried the scars of 1,000 battles. When he smiled, it was with the confidence of someone who had walked this earth for an impossibly long time. "Adrian Blackstone," Kyle said, rising from a desk covered in documents. "I've been waiting for you. Please, sit. We have much to discuss." "I don't discuss with traitors," Adrian said coldly. "Traitors?" Kyle laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Adrian, I'm not betraying our species. I'm saving it. Look around you. Look at what's happening in the human world. Their technology gets more advanced every day. Their surveillance capabilities grow exponentially. It's only a matter of time before they discover us. I'm proposing we control that discovery, rather than be exposed like rats found in the pantry. By orchestrating the exposure yourself," Adrian said. "By putting every werewolf on the planet at risk." "Yes," Kale said simply. "And you know why that's the right choice? Because we'll be prepared. We'll have united the packs beforehand. We'll present a unified front to the human world. We'll be strong." "You'll start a war," Adrian said. "The humans outnumber us 10,000 to 1. They have weapons we can't imagine. You're not saving our species, Kale. You're condemning it. Or I'm liberating it," Kale countered. "I'm tired of hiding, Adrian. Aren't you? Aren't you tired of pretending to be human? Of keeping the most important part of ourselves locked away in darkness?" Sophie felt something shift in the room. She felt Adrian's absolute certainty that Kale couldn't be reasoned with, that this was going to end in violence. "I came here to give you one chance," Adrian said. "Disband this operation. Stop your recruitment efforts. Stop planning your exposure. Do this. And I'll let you live." "And if I refuse?" Kyle asked, though he was already standing, already moving toward the door at the back of his chamber. "Then I'll burn this entire compound to the ground and leave nothing but ash," Adrian said conversationally. Kale smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had been waiting for permission to do something terrible. "Then I refuse." He transformed as he ran, his body shifting into the form of a massive wolf, white as fresh snow with golden eyes that blazed with ancient power. He crashed through the window and Sophie heard the alarm bells start ringing throughout the compound. Adrian was already shifting, already sprinting after his opponent. Sophie felt the mate bond pull tight as chaos erupted around them. The other wolves from Kale's compound were pouring out to join the fight, and Adrian's warriors were matching them surge for surge. "Come on," Marcus said, grabbing Sophie's arm. "We need to get you somewhere safe." "No," Sophie said firmly. She reached out through the pack bond, the connection that linked her to every Blackstone wolf in the area, and sent them something. Strength, certainty, the knowledge that they were fighting for something right. She could feel the effect immediately. The Blackstone wolves seemed to move faster, hit harder, fight with more viciousness. They were drawing strength from their Luna, who believed in them completely. Outside, Adrian and Kale were locked in combat that seemed to exist on a completely different level than the fight between Dominic and Adrian had been. These were two ancient alphas fighting with the weight of centuries behind every movement. They weren't just fighting for territory or pride, they were fighting for the future of their entire species. Adrian was incredibly fast, but Kale was more powerful. The white wolf seemed to hit like a battering ram, driving Adrian backward, drawing blood. But Adrian was smarter, more experienced, more cunning. He waited for Kale to overextend, and then twisted underneath him, snapping for the other wolf's exposed belly. The fight raged on for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. And then Adrian saw his opening. As Kale came at him again, Adrian pivoted and caught him by the throat, not killing him, but positioning himself so that he could. "Submit," Adrian growled. Kale could have chosen death. Sophie realized in that moment that he actually wanted to. He wanted to die a martyr to his cause. But Adrian wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, Adrian released him and, in his human form, looked down at the wounded wolf beneath him. "You're exiled from all Blackstone territory," Adrian said. "And I'm declaring a formal challenge to all pack alphas across the continent. Any pack that harbors you or supports your cause will be considered an enemy of unified Werkind. Is that understood?" Kyle transformed back to human form, his body covered in blood. He was laughing, even as the light faded from his eyes. He wasn't dead, Adrian hadn't killed him. But he was broken, and more importantly, he was defeated. As they walked back to their vehicles, Sophie felt the exhaustion of the day hit her like a physical weight. Adrian pulled her close, not caring who saw, too relieved that she was alive and whole to maintain his alpha composure. "Don't ever scare me like that again," he said against the top of her head. "I didn't," Sophie pointed out. "I was safe. You were the one out there getting slashed by an ancient alpha." "Yes," Adrian said. "And I could hear your voice in my head the entire time, telling me to be strong. I could feel your faith. That's the only reason I won." The journey back to the Blackstone compound was quieter than the journey south had been. Adrian was wrapped up in his own thoughts, processing victory and its implications. Sophie sat beside him in the vehicle, her hand resting on his thigh, and tried not to think about how close they'd come to losing. But back at the compound, reality set in quickly. 7 Blackstone warriors had died in the fight. 15 more were badly injured. And the news was spreading through the werewolf community like wildfire. Adrian Blackstone had declared war on anyone who supported exposure of their species to humans. It was a line in the sand that every alpha in North America would have to choose a side of. Sophie sat with the families of the fallen warriors, using her Luna authority to ensure they were cared for, their grief honored. She attended the memorial ceremony, where the pack spoke the names of the dead, and the moon goddess was asked to welcome them home. She felt the weight of their loss like a stone in her chest. That night, Adrian was distant. Not cold, but removed, like some part of him was still on the mountain fighting battles that had nothing to do with Kale. "Talk to me," Sophie said, curling up next to him in bed. "We're going to war," Adrian said simply. "Maybe not open war, not yet. But the lines are being drawn. Every pack is going to have to choose. And some of them will choose against us. Because they want exposure," Sophie said, understanding. "Yes, there are alphas who believe Kale was right, who think our species is ready to be revealed. They're going to push for it, regardless of the consequences. And when they do, we'll be forced to stop them." "We'll win," Sophie said with certainty. Adrian turned to look at her. "Amore, there are things happening that you don't fully understand. Political forces that run deeper than pack loyalty. There's a reason we've hidden for so long. It's not just about safety, it's about power, about maintaining the balance between our world and the human world. If that balance tips, if humans discover us, before we're truly ready, you'll adapt," Sophie said firmly. "You've survived for 200 years. You've survived wars with other packs, threats from hunters, the evolution of human society, from horse and buggy to smartphones. You'll survive this too. Adrian pulled her close, and Sophie felt the tension in his body begin to ease. I hope you're right, my Luna. Because I don't know what I'd do if I lost you in the fallout. You won't, Sophie said. I'm not going anywhere. But even as she said it, she felt something shift in the universe. A wrongness. A darkness gathering at the edges of their story. The vision from the moon goddess came back to her, the warning about the darkness that was coming. Over the next few weeks, that darkness began to take form. An alpha named Thorn from the eastern seaboard publicly announced his support for exposure and began recruiting packs to his cause. Simultaneously, a council of the oldest alphas, the Conclave, called for a summit. All the major pack leaders from across North America were being summoned to neutral territory to discuss the future of their species. Adrian would have to attend, which meant leaving Sophie alone in the compound for the first time since she'd become Luna. You're coming with me, Adrian said when Sophie raised the subject. No, Sophie said firmly. The Conclave is alpha only. You know that. And the compound needs a Luna here. Someone to maintain order and make decisions while you're gone. Sophie. Adrian, you taught me that leadership sometimes means being separated from the people you love, Sophie said gently. You taught me that duty comes before desire. I'm asking you to trust me to handle things here while you handle things there. Adrian looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. He pulled her close and held her like he was afraid letting go might mean losing her forever. I love you, he said. Never forget that. Whatever happens at the Conclave, whatever decisions get made, you are my priority. You are always my priority. I know, Sophie said. And I love you too. With Adrian gone, Sophie took her duties as Luna more seriously than ever. She found herself making real decisions, settling disputes between pack members, approving building projects, reviewing training regimens. She was good at it in a way that surprised even her. She had compassion, but also firmness. She cared about the welfare of the pack but also understood when hard lines needed to be drawn. Victor seemed surprised by her competence. He'd expected her to founder without Adrian there to guide her. Instead, she thrived. You're more alpha than some of the males I've known, Victor told her one afternoon as they reviewed the pack's resources. It's interesting. Is that a compliment? Sophie asked. An observation, Victor said. But his mouth twitched slightly, like he might have smiled if he'd allowed himself. The pack is fortunate to have you as Luna. But on the 5th day that Adrian was away, everything changed. Chloe, the small, frightened Omega, who had joined the pack from Dominic's group, came to Sophie in tears. I'm pregnant, Chloe said, her voice trembling. And the father? He's not from the pack. I had a relationship before I came here, and I didn't know about it until now. And Sophie? I don't know what to do. I don't know how the pack will react. I don't know if Adrian will allow me to stay. Sophie sat down with Chloe and held her hand. First, you're staying. Nothing changes that. You're part of the pack now, under Adrian's and my protection. Second, who's the father? He's human, Chloe said. I met him when I was with Dominic. I didn't know I was going to be taken from the Northern Pack. I didn't realize. I did tell him goodbye, but I didn't tell him about the baby, because I wasn't even sure myself until now. Sophie's mind was already working through the complications. A half-human, half-werewolf child. That was rare, but not unheard of. The child would be born with significant power potential but also vulnerability while young. And there were questions about what the child's nature would be. Would they be fully wolf, fully human, or something in between? Does Adrian know? Chloe asked anxiously. Not yet, Sophie said. But he will. And he will be angry not at you, but at the situation. But I promise you, he won't force you to leave. He won't hurt you or your child. Sophie knew Adrian well enough to be certain of that. But she also knew this would be complicated. Mixed-race children, human and werewolf, raised questions about pack law that weren't often addressed because the situations were rare. She decided to call Adrian at the Conclave rather than tell him through regular channels. It would be easier face-to-face, even if it was through video call. When Adrian's face appeared on the screen, he looked exhausted. The Conclave was clearly intense. My Luna, he said, softening immediately. How is everything? Fine, Sophie said. I'm calling about something else. Adrian. Do you remember Chloe? The Omega who joined us from the Northern Pack? Yes. Is she in trouble? No. But she's pregnant. With a human father. There was a long silence. Sophie watched Adrian process this information. His jaw clenched. His eyes flickered silver. Who? He asked, finally. A human male she was with before Dominic brought her to us. She didn't know she was pregnant until now. Does she want to keep the child? Yes, Sophie said. And Adrian, she's terrified you'll tell her to leave. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then, she stays. The child stays. We'll handle the complications as they come. But Sophie, this is going to be difficult. Half-breed children are rare for a reason. They occupy a strange space in our world. Some packs would kill the child rather than allow it to exist. We're not some packs, Sophie said firmly. We protect our own. I know, Adrian said, and she could hear the pride in his voice. That's why I love you, amore. That's why you're my Luna. After the call ended, Sophie went to Chloe and told her she could stay, that her child would be protected and cared for. Watching relief flood across Chloe's face, Sophie realized something profound. This was her role. Not just in administrative capacity, but in truly shepherding the vulnerable. In being the heart of the pack, while Adrian was the head. But that night, she had another vision. The moon goddess came to her again. And this time, she wasn't just warning. She was showing Sophie images of the future. She saw Adrian in conflict with other alphas. She saw blood spilled on sacred ground. She saw Sophie herself making a choice that would change everything. And then she saw darkness. Complete, utter darkness. And silence. Sophie woke up screaming. Adrian came home 3 days later, and Sophie knew immediately that something had fundamentally changed. The conclave meeting had shifted the landscape of werewolf politics in ways that were still unfolding. What happened? Sophie asked, searching his face for clues. We're fracturing, Adrian said simply. They were in his study, door locked, just the two of them. Not officially yet, but the cracks are showing. The conclave voted to form a committee to study the feasibility of exposure. It's not a commitment to exposure yet, but it's a move in that direction. The traditional alphas, those of us who have been alive for centuries, are opposed. The younger alphas, the ones who came of age in this modern world, are in favor. And what did you say? Sophie asked. I said that any pack that moves toward unauthorized exposure will face consequences, Adrian said flatly. I said the Blackstone pack will defend the old laws. I said that if exposure happens, it will be on the terms of the unified packs, with preparation and strategy, not because one rogue alpha decided to prove a point. Are they going to listen? No, Adrian said. I could feel it. They're going to move forward with KL's plan, just in a more organized way. And I'm going to have to stop them. Which means, he looked directly at Sophie. Which means I need to prepare for war. Sophie felt cold. Against other packs? Against our own species if necessary, Adrian said grimly. Sophie, I need you to understand what this means. There will be fighting. There will be deaths. Not just warriors, but civilians too. And the humans will inevitably find out. There will be exposure, just not the kind either side is planning for. Sophie moved into Adrian's arms. Then we prepare. You prepare the warriors. I prepare the civilian population. We become ready for whatever comes. Over the next weeks, the compound transformed. What had been a place of relative peace became a training ground. Warriors pushed themselves harder. Defenses were strengthened. Medical facilities were expanded. And Sophie worked with the non-combatants, the children, the elderly, the non-warrior members of the pack to create contingency plans for evacuation if needed. It was during this time that she fully stepped into her Luna role. She wasn't just Adrian's mate anymore. She was a leader in her own right, someone the pack could count on, someone they respected and followed. Chloe became one of her closest allies during this time. The Omega's pregnancy progressed, and she began showing signs of the rare gift that sometimes manifested in mixed-race children. She could sense human emotions and intentions in ways that purely werewolf wolves couldn't. It made her valuable in planning how the pack might interact with humans if exposure became necessary. But the real turning point came on a night when Sophie couldn't sleep. She went to the compound's archive, the room where all of the pack's historical records were kept, and found Victor there, searching through old documents. Couldn't sleep either, he asked, when he sensed her presence. Too much on my mind, Sophie said. What are you looking for? Historical precedent, Victor said. For what's coming. There was a time, centuries ago, when the werewolf world nearly exposed itself to humanity. There was a plague that swept through Europe, and wolves were blamed. It caused chaos. Hunters rose up, Some packs were nearly wiped out. Others thrived by going underground, by becoming myth. What's the lesson? Sophie asked. That exposure is always catastrophic, Victor said, and that the only way to survive catastrophe is unity. The packs need to stand together, or we'll all fall separately. You've been against me since I arrived, Sophie said. It wasn't a question. I was, Victor admitted. I thought you would weaken Adrian. I thought a human Luna would compromise his judgment. I was wrong. Sophie was shocked. Victor didn't apologize or admit error lightly. You've become something special, Victor continued. You've made the Blackstone pack stronger. You've united them in ways Adrian alone never could. And you've taught me something I'd forgotten in my centuries, that strength can come from compassion as well as dominance. Why are you telling me this? Sophie asked. Because, Victor said. I think you need to know that when the war comes, you won't be facing it alone. I will stand with you and Adrian. And so will many others who doubted at first. The war didn't come the way Adrian had expected. There was no formal declaration, no aligned armies marching into Blackstone territory. Instead, it was insidious and internal. Packs that supported exposure began actively recruiting from other territories. Young wolves, dissatisfied with tradition, were drawn to the promise of a new world where they wouldn't have to hide. Some Blackstone warriors left. Not many, but enough to show that the unity Adrian had worked so hard to build was starting to crack. The final straw came when Sophie was attacked. She was out on a morning run, transformed into her wolf form, something she'd finally learned to do after months of training, when a group of rogue wolves came at her from all sides. Sophie, even in wolf form, was powerful enough to hold her own, but she was outnumbered 5-1. Adrian's connection to her through the mate bond activated like an alarm system the moment she was in danger. He was in a meeting with Marcus and Victor when it happened, and he went absolutely still, every fiber of his being alert to the urgency of her fear. Sophie, he whispered, and then he was moving, transforming, running toward her location with Marcus and every warrior he could gather right behind him. He arrived to find Sophie in her human form, bleeding from a dozen wounds, surrounded by the bodies of 3 dead wolves. The other 2 rogue attackers fled when they saw Adrian's massive silver form appear from the trees, and Adrian didn't bother pursuing them. He rushed to Sophie and transformed, gathering her into his arms. I'm okay, Sophie gasped. I'm okay. They came out of nowhere, Adrian. I think they were trying to kill me. Shh, Adrian said, already signaling for the healers who had followed behind. You're safe now. You're safe. But he was furious. A rage that went beyond anything Sophie had felt from him before radiated through their mate bond. These rogue wolves had tried to kill his Luna. That was a declaration of war that went beyond politics or ideology. That night, Adrian called for every alpha who had publicly supported traditional werewolf law and made it clear. The time for negotiation was over. The packs needed to unite or face destruction separately. Any pack that continued to support exposure would be considered enemies of unified werekind. Any rogue wolves caught on Blackstone territory would be executed. The response was swift and divisive. Some alphas agreed with Adrian and pledged their allegiance. Others refused to choose sides, declaring themselves neutral. And a significant faction led by an alpha named Sienna, who Sophie realized must be Kale's mate and successor, openly declared their intention to move forward with coordinated exposure. They're planning something big, Marcus reported to Adrian and Sophie. Intelligence suggests they're positioning to release information to human governments and media simultaneously across multiple countries. They're planning simultaneous exposure events in New York, London, Tokyo, and Sydney. They want to make it impossible for anyone to cover it up or suppress the information. When? Adrian asked. 2 weeks, Marcus said. Maybe less. Adrian looked at Sophie, and in his eyes, she saw the weight of the impossible choice he was facing. Expose the werewolf world himself to prevent a worse exposure orchestrated by his enemies, or try to stop them militarily. We have a third option, Sophie said quietly. Both men looked at her. We tell the truth, Sophie said. We reach out to the human governments ourselves, but not to the public. We give them a choice. We reveal ourselves to them officially, under controlled circumstances, in exchange for protection and negotiated coexistence terms. We beat Sienna to the punch, but we do it strategically. That's insane, Marcus said. Humanity has hunted us for centuries. Why would they agree to coexistence? Because, Sophie said, most of the current human governments are rational actors. They understand that a war with a hidden species living among them is not in their interest. If we approach them with proof, with offers of mutual benefit, they might actually listen. Adrian was already considering it. Sophie could see the wheels turning in his mind. We'd need representatives, he said. Trustworthy alphas who could negotiate on behalf of all packs. And we'd need ironclad assurances of protection. I'll do it, Victor said from the doorway. He'd been listening the entire time. I'll be one of your representatives. I have contacts in several governments from centuries past. People who might remember what it's like to negotiate with someone who isn't trying to kill them. And I'll go with you, Sophie said firmly. Absolutely not, Adrian said, his immediate reaction fierce. I just almost lost you once. I'm not putting you in front of human governments. Yes, you are, Sophie said calmly. Because they'll listen to me in a way they won't listen to you. A human mate to an alpha shows them that we're not so different. That coexistence is possible. I'm the bridge between our worlds, Adrian. This is my role. Adrian wanted to argue. But Sophie could feel through their bond that he knew she was right. The Luna, as ambassador. The bridge between werewolf and human worlds. It was a role no Luna had ever had to fill before. But in a moment of unprecedented change, it was necessary. Sophie had never been to the capital before. Despite being born and raised a human, she'd lived a relatively sheltered life in the Pacific Northwest. Now, she found herself walking through the halls of government buildings, dressed in professional attire, speaking to men and women in positions of power about a species they never knew existed. Victor was her secret weapon. He proved to have contacts exactly where they needed them, an older woman who'd been with the State Department for decades, someone who remembered meeting werewolves centuries ago when diplomatic relations had been attempted. There was a general in the Department of Defense who'd suspected the existence of something hidden in the world's shadows and was curious enough to listen. There was a scientist at the CDC who'd long wondered about the statistical oddities in werewolf communities that she'd dismissed as data errors. One by one, Sophie and Victor and Adrian, who insisted on being there despite the risks, showed them proof. Documented histories, DNA evidence, recordings of wolves transforming, pack records dating back centuries. You're asking us to keep a secret that could change the world, one government official said. We're asking you to negotiate a future that works for everyone, Sophie countered. Your government already knows that humans can't coexist peacefully with creatures of incredible power once those creatures are revealed. Riots, hunts, military responses, it's chaos. We're offering an alternative. We're offering to reveal ourselves on terms that allow for gradual integration, education, and mutual benefit. What kind of mutual benefit? Another official asked. Werewolves have abilities humans don't, Sophie said. Enhanced strength, speed, healing, senses. With proper training and ethical oversight, we could work alongside law enforcement, military, medical fields. And in exchange, we get legal protections, documentation of our communities, the ability to live openly, without constant fear of exposure. The negotiations took weeks. There were setbacks and moments when Sophie thought the entire plan would fall apart. But she persisted. And Adrian's presence, even though it terrified the human officials, lended weight to the discussions. Here was an alpha, hundreds of years old, willing to trust humans with the secret of his entire species. That kind of faith couldn't be ignored. Meanwhile, back at the compound, Sienna made her move. The rogue packs attempted their simultaneous exposure, releasing information to media outlets and social media simultaneously. But Adrian had anticipated this. The Blackstone pack was ready with their own counter-narrative, supporting the official government statement that went out at the exact same moment. The human world erupted in chaos for approximately 48 hours. Then, as governments took control of the narrative and presented the evidence in an orderly, scientific framework, panic began to ease. Werewolves were real. They'd always been real. And the human governments, at least initially, responded with measured response rather than hunt and destroy. Sophie watched news reports from a government conference room as the world adapted to this new reality. There was anger from some humans, fear from others, but also curiosity. And in some cases, hope. The idea that hidden among them were people of incredible strength and honor appealed to something deep in the human psyche. The final negotiations resulted in the Supernatural Integration Act, a legal framework that allowed werewolves to exist openly but required cooperation with government authorities, restrictions on exposure of younger wolves until age 18, and a special task force to handle disputes between packs and human law enforcement. Sophie signed the documents on behalf of the Blackstone pack. Adrian signed them. Victor signed them. And for the first time in centuries, werewolves were no longer hidden. The transition to public werewolf existence was chaotic but managed. Some packs accepted it readily, others fought it fiercely, but with the support of human governments, the traditional structure of werewolf society was able to adapt. Sienna's rogue packs were arrested when they violated the terms of the Integration Act by attempting to recruit humans into their groups without proper authorization. Kale, still in exile, was even more marginalized now that his ideological reason for existence, the secret nature of werewolf society, had been eliminated. Sophie found herself becoming famous. The human media loved her story, a human woman claimed as a mate by a powerful werewolf alpha, transformed into a Luna, and instrumental in negotiating the coexistence of two worlds. Movies and books were already in development about her story. She tried to ignore the attention and focus on what mattered: her pack, her mate, and the future they were building together. 6 months after the public revelation, Sophie stood beside Adrian at the dedication of the new Supernatural Integration Center in Portland. It was a joint effort between the werewolf packs and the human government, designed to educate both species about each other, to mediate disputes, and to begin the long process of genuine coexistence. "I can't believe this is real," Sophie said, looking up at the building that bore a plaque with both human and wolf symbols intertwined. "We made it real," Adrian said, squeezing her hand. "You made it real." That evening, they returned to the compound, which was no longer quite so secret, though it remained a private territory. Adrian had made changes to the structure, allowing for more openness with the outside world while maintaining the safety and privacy of the pack. In their quarters, Adrian pulled out a small box. "I know we're technically already mated," he said, "but I want to do this the human way too. I want you to have the choice to say yes or no." "Sophie Hartley, will you marry me? Will you stand with me not just as Luna, but as my wife? In front of all the worlds, werewolf and human alike?" Sophie was crying before he even finished the question. "Yes, yes, Adrian, always yes." The wedding was scheduled for the following month. It was going to be a combined ceremony, werewolf traditions and human traditions woven together. The pack would gather. The human government would send representatives. It was going to be the first major public event showcasing successful human-werewolf integration. As Sophie planned the wedding, she found herself genuinely happy in a way she'd never thought possible. Her life had changed so drastically from that night running through the forest in fear. She had found her mate, her purpose, her home. She had helped shape the future. And soon, she would marry the man, the alpha who had made it all possible. The day of the wedding dawned clear and perfect, with golden sunlight pouring through the mountains like liquid amber. Sophie woke up in her own chambers. Tradition dictated that the bride and groom not see each other the morning of the wedding, and found Chloe waiting for her with breakfast and nervous energy. "You're getting married today," Chloe said, bouncing on her toes. Her pregnancy was now quite visible, and she glowed with the anticipation of motherhood. "How are you not panicking?" "I'm panicking internally," Sophie admitted. "But I've had months to plan this. And I've had my mate bonded to me for almost a year. The ceremony is just making official what I've already known, that Adrian is my forever." The dress was even more spectacular than the one Sophie had worn for the Luna ceremony. It was white silk and ethereal lace, with thousands of hand-sewn crystals that caught the light like captured starshine. The bodice was fitted, showing off the strength she'd gained since becoming Luna, and the skirt cascaded down in layers of flowing fabric that seemed to float when she moved. Her hair was arranged in an intricate updo with white roses woven through it, and small silver chains with moonstones were interspersed throughout. When Rebecca came to walk her down the aisle, human tradition, Sophie felt her eyes fill with tears. "You look absolutely beautiful," Rebecca said, squeezing her hand. "Adrian is going to lose his mind when he sees you." The ceremony was held in the natural amphitheater where Sophie had been made Luna, but it had been transformed. Thousands of lights were strung between trees, creating a canopy of stars. Chairs had been arranged for human guests and designated areas for werewolves. The entire Blackstone pack was present, along with representatives from dozens of other packs. Human government officials were in attendance, along with the ambassadors Sophie had worked with to negotiate the Integration Act. But most importantly, Adrian was waiting at the altar. He wore a custom-tailored suit in deep charcoal gray with a silver shirt and tie. His dark hair was combed back from his face, and his silver eyes were locked on Sophie the moment she appeared. The look in his eyes, absolute possession, absolute love, absolute certainty, made Sophie's heart skip a beat. Rebecca handed Sophie off to Adrian, and the ancient ceremony began. The werewolf elder who conducted the Luna ceremony presided, but there was also a human officiant there to make it legally binding in the human world. "We gather," the elder began, "under the light of the stars and the moon, to witness the union of Luna Sophie and Alpha Adrian. In the sight of all worlds, werewolf and human alike, these two souls come together not just as mates, but as partners in all things." "Who speaks for the Luna?" "I do," Rebecca said, stepping forward. "I speak for her courage, her compassion, and her ability to bridge worlds." "Who speaks for the Alpha?" the elder asked. "I do," Victor said, rising from the front row. "I speak for his strength, his wisdom, and his willingness to evolve. I speak for an Alpha who chose love over legacy, connection over tradition." The ceremony proceeded with beautiful words spoken by both the werewolf and human officiants. When it came time for vows, Adrian took Sophie's hands. "Sophie," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the amphitheater, "I have lived for 2 centuries. I have led packs, won wars, survived heartbreak and loss. But I have never felt alive until I smelled you in that holding room, and knew, without question, that I had finally found what my soul had been searching for. You are my mate, my Luna, my wife. You are the reason I'm willing to change everything I thought was immovable. You are my forever, Sophie. In this life and every life after. You are mine. And I am yours." Sophie was openly crying now, her hands trembling in his. "Adrian," she said, "I came into your world terrified and broken. I ran from fear and found myself in your arms. You could have been anything. A predator, a monster, someone to be afraid of. Instead, you were patient. You were kind. You showed me what it meant to be chosen, to be valued, to be loved so completely, that my safety became your priority. You've taught me that strength and gentleness can coexist, that an Alpha can be ruthless with enemies and tender with his mate. You are my home, Adrian. You are my peace. I will stand beside you, face any darkness with you, build any future with you. I love you completely." When Adrian kissed her, the entire gathering erupted in sound human cheers mixed with werewolf howls of celebration. It was a moment that felt like it belonged to all worlds, a perfect fusion of species and tradition and love. The reception was held in the great hall of the compound. There was dancing, feasting, and laughter. Sophie danced with Adrian, who held her like she might disappear if he let go. She danced with Victor, who had become something of an unlikely mentor figure. She danced with human government officials and werewolf alphas. She danced with her new pack family. As the night wore on and the party continued around them, Adrian pulled Sophie out onto the balcony, overlooking the mountains. "My wife," he said, the words like a prayer. "I still can't quite believe it." "Believe it," Sophie said, pressing herself against his chest. "I'm not going anywhere. We have forever, Adrian. Forever and always." They stood together in the starlight, watching the world that they had helped reshape continue on below them. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear the calls of wolves, not in fear or hunting, but in celebration and joy. The barrier between worlds was breaking down, slowly but surely. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked. "All of this? Your old human life was simpler." "My old life was lonely," Sophie said. "I was running from a man who didn't value me, working a job that didn't fulfill me, living in a world that felt too small. And then you found me, and everything changed. Could I have lived that old life forever? Probably. But would I have lived? No. I was existing. Now I'm alive, Adrian. I'm truly alive." Adrian turned her to face him, and kissed her again, this time with the knowledge that she was truly, completely his. Later that night, when the party had wound down and most of the guests had retired to their quarters or homes, Adrian took Sophie to a place she'd never been, a hidden chamber deep beneath the compound. "This is the heart of the Blackstone territory," Adrian explained, leading her by candlelight down stone passages covered in ancient werewolf symbols. "This is where the Alpha bond is sealed, where the soul of the pack is strongest." The chamber opened up into a massive cavern with a pool of crystal-clear water that seemed to glow with its own internal light. The walls were covered in luminescent moss, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. "This is where we seal our bond completely," Adrian said, pulling her close. "Not just as mates, but as one soul in 2 bodies. Not all couples choose to do this. It's a choice that can only be made willingly, with full understanding of what it means. What does it mean? Sophie asked, though she felt like she already knew. It means that our souls become intertwined at a level even deeper than the mate bond, Adrian said. It means that I will always be able to find you, no matter where in the world you are. It means our thoughts can blend together. Our emotions will become shared. Our very essences will be tied together until death. And after death? Sophie asked. Our souls will travel together to whatever comes next, Adrian said. We will never be truly separated, Sophie. Never in this life or any other. Sophie reached down and began to undress. Adrian followed, and soon they were both in their human forms, standing at the edge of the glowing pool. They entered the water together, and it was warm like a lover's embrace, filled with energy that thrummed through their bodies. They made love in that ancient place, surrounded by the spiritual heart of the pack. As they moved together, Sophie felt the boundaries between them begin to dissolve. She could feel Adrian's thoughts, his emotions, his absolute, overwhelming love for her. And she could feel him experiencing the same from her trust, her devotion, her complete surrender to their bond. When it was over, they floated in the pool, and Sophie understood with perfect clarity that she was no longer just Sophie. She was Sophie and Adrian. Adrian and Sophie, two halves of a whole that could never be divided. I love you, Adrian whispered. I am you, Sophie replied. And you are me. We are one. They remained in the pool until dawn began to break, and then they returned to the world above, forever changed, forever complete. Sophie stood in the nursery of the Blackstone compound, watching as Chloe carefully placed her newborn son in a specially designed crib. The baby named Noah was the first documented half-human, half-werewolf child born after the public integration. He was a symbol of possibility, of worlds coming together. He's perfect, Sophie whispered, gently touching the infant's soft cheek. Noah had his mother's delicate features but his father's dark eyes. He was also showing early signs of extraordinary power. At just 3 months old, he'd managed a partial shift that amazed the pack's healers. Luna, a voice called from downstairs. Adrian is here. He brought visitors. Sophie made her way down to find her mate in conversation with 2 alphas she recognized from the Supernatural Integration Council. They were here for the monthly summit where pack leaders across the continent met to discuss the ongoing integration process. Adrian's eyes lit up when he saw her, and he immediately pulled her to his side. Even after a year of marriage, his need to touch her, to keep her close, hadn't diminished. If anything, it had deepened. My wife, Adrian said, his tone making it clear that the title meant far more than the legal documentation. You were with Chloe? Just checking on Noah, Sophie said. He's growing so fast. He is a remarkable child, one of the visiting alphas, a woman named Kira, said. There are other mixed pairings that have formed since the integration. There are at least 8 pregnancies that we know of. Your work in creating the acceptance framework, Luna Sophie, has made that possible. Sophie smiled. The acceptance framework had been her project, a set of guidelines and protocols for mixed human werewolf couples and mixed-race children. It had become one of the most important documents in the Integration Act, ensuring that these new families weren't treated as aberrations, but as valued members of the werewolf community. How is the rest of the world adapting? Sophie asked as they moved to Adrian's study for the formal meeting. Better than expected, the other alpha. Marcus Vale, no relation to Kale, said. The initial hysteria has passed. Some human governments are now establishing task forces to work with werewolves in law enforcement and military applications. There's cultural resistance in some regions, but nothing we can't manage. And the packs? Adrian asked. How are the traditionalists handling integration? Some are thriving, Kira said. Others are struggling with the loss of secrecy. Victor Sinclair and I were discussing the possibility of a mentorship program for older alphas who are struggling to adapt. Your example has helped showing that tradition and progress aren't mutually exclusive. After the meeting concluded and the visiting alphas departed, Adrian pulled Sophie onto the balcony they both loved so well. Do you ever think about that night? Adrian asked. The night you ran into the forest and everything changed? Every day, Sophie said honestly. I think about how terrified I was, how I thought my life was ending, how I had no idea I was actually beginning. Adrian pulled her against him, his large hand splaying across her lower back. I have something for you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small journal, leather-bound and beautiful. What is this? Sophie asked, taking it carefully. Our story, Adrian said. I've been writing it. Everything from that first moment I smelled you to now. I wanted it documented. Sophie. I wanted future generations to know how two worlds came together. How love was the bridge. Sophie opened the journal and saw Adrian's careful handwriting filling the pages. Pages about that first meeting in the holding room. Pages about their first kiss. Pages about the Luna ceremony. The duel with Dominic. The fight with Kale. The negotiations with the human governments. The wedding. She found herself laughing and crying simultaneously. I love you, she said. So much that sometimes it scares me. What if something happens to you? What if… Shh, Adrian said, tipping her chin up to look at him. We've already done the soul seal, amore. Nothing can separate us now. We are bound beyond the reach of death or fate. I will always find my way back to you. Sophie kissed him as the sun began to set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She thought about everything that had brought her here, the fear that had driven her into the forest, the chance meeting that had changed everything, the journey from terrified human to confident Luna. She thought about how love had transformed not just her life, but the lives of everyone around her, how a single mate bond had sparked a chain reaction that ultimately changed the course of history for an entire species. Adrian pulled back slightly to look at her. What are you thinking about? Fated mates, Sophie said softly. I used to think it was a myth. Now I know it's real. I know that somewhere in this universe, there's a force that guides souls together, that brought us together. Do you believe in fate? Adrian asked. I believe in choices, Sophie said. I believe we had the choice to accept our bond or fight it. We chose to accept it. We chose to trust. We chose each other. That's not fate. That's love. Adrian smiled, a real smile that reached his silver eyes. Then let's choose each other every day for the rest of our lives. Forever, Sophie agreed. They stood together on the balcony as night fell and the stars came out, beautiful, and eternal, and unchanging. And below them, in the compound and throughout the territories beyond, the packs stirred with life. Wolves that had once hidden in shadows now walked under moonlight without fear. Humans and werewolves worked side by side, building a new world together. And at the heart of it all were two souls, bound by mate, bond, and love, forever intertwined, forever complete.